Why did the radio whisper her name when the world had already decided she was finished? The desert wind never slept at Bram Air Base. It slid through the hangars like a restless memory, lifting dust, tapping loose metal, reminding everyone that nothing here was ever truly still. In Hangar 12, under a flickering floodlight, Issa Morno knelt beside the exposed engine of an A-10, her hands black with oil, her mind somewhere far above the clouds. She worked slowly, not because the job required it, but because slowing down was the only way to keep the past from rushing in. They used to call her Captain. These days it was just Morno, a name said without rank like a tool pulled from a drawer. 2 years earlier she had refused an order over Kandahar. Intelligence had been wrong. Civilians were in the crosshairs. She broke formation. She warned instead of firing. People lived. Her career didn't. Command called it insubordination. She called it a line she couldn't cross. The younger mechanics joked when they thought she couldn't hear. Ghost pilot, grounded legend. Issa let the words pass through her like wind through wire. The truth was heavier than their laughter. She still heard engines in her sleep. Still woke with hands clenched, feeling for controls that weren't there. That night the radio murmured in the background. Routine chatter, weather checks, distant call signs. Issa tuned it out until one word cut through the noise. Hindu Kush. Her spine stiffened. She knew those mountains. She knew how sound died there, how hope thinned at altitude. Echo 9 requesting confirmation, a calm voice said. Too calm. The kind of calm that came right before everything fell apart. Issa's hands moved on instinct, tightening a bolt that didn't need it. She could see the valley without a map, the ridgelines, the ambush points. She had flown that route years ago, watching tiny figures move through shadows, trusting the sky to watch back. When the hangar finally emptied, she sat alone on the metal steps, staring at the shark-toothed grin painted on the A-10's nose. She rested her palm against the cold fuselage. You remember, she whispered, not a question, a promise. Outside, the sun bled into the mountains. Somewhere deep inside her, the part that had been buried under silence stirred. Not loud, not proud, just awake. And far away, in a valley that swallowed sound, 5 Marines waited for a voice to answer. What happens when help is needed, and the system decides the cost is too high? The first call came just after dusk. Inside the operations room at Bagram, it was business as usual. Fluorescent lights, clipped voices, checklists moving from one hand to another. Echo 9 reported contact. Small arms fire. Weather worsening. Requesting verification. The duty officer barely looked up. Terrain's bad. Visibility worse. No airframes available. The second call was shorter, tighter, pinned. Coordinates transmitting, requesting close air support. Silence followed. Not the kind caused by static, but the kind caused by decision. Risk assessments, probability charts. The kind of silence that feels clean on paper and deadly on the ground. Colonel Abrams signed off without drama. Mission risk exceeds benefit. Across the base, in a hangar that smelled of oil and rain, Issa Morno heard everything through a maintenance headset she wasn't supposed to be wearing anymore. Her pulse quickened with every clipped transmission. She stepped into the communications office, voice steady. Sir, you're not sending anyone. The officer didn't meet her eyes. Ground command denied. You're not in flight status. I know that valley, she said. If they're stuck on the eastern ridgeline without cover, they won't make sunrise. Abrams turned, expression carved from experience and fatigue. You've done enough flying, Captain. The word stung, because it sounded like it belonged to a ghost. Dismissed. Issa walked out into the wind. On the radio, a Marine's voice cracked through gunfire. We need eyes in the sky. She sat on the steps of her hangar, hands trembling despite herself. The rules were clear. So were the consequences, court-martial, prison, erasure. But beneath all of it was another truth, quieter and heavier. She had been on the other end of that silence once, waiting, counting breaths. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a frayed patch, A falcon in a dive. Falcon 4. Hold on, she whispered. I hear you. Thunder rolled in the distance, long and low, like engines waiting to wake. At what point does obedience become abandonment? Midnight broke over the base with rain slashing sideways across the runway. Issa paced until the decision stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like gravity. Hangar 14 loomed ahead. Her hangar. The A-10 sat inside, dark and tagged in red. Inoperable. Do not fly. Paper lies, she thought. Metal doesn't. She had rebuilt that jet with her own hands. Every line, every system. The Iron Angel wasn't dead. It was waiting. Her fingers hovered over the access keypad. Dual authorization required. She still knew both codes, one from memory, one from belief. Green light. Inside the cockpit, the world narrowed to switches and breath. The aircraft woke slowly, reluctantly, then fully, lights blooming, systems humming like a heartbeat returning. She climbed into the seat, the shape of it fitting her like it always had. "Don't you dare die on me tonight," she murmured. A shape appeared in the hangar doorway. Sergeant Harlow. His face went pale. "They'll court-martial you," he said. "I'll live with that," she replied. "I won't live with this." He hesitated. Then silently he opened the hangar doors to the storm. "Winds are clearing east," he said. "You've got maybe 20 minutes." The turbines ignited, thunder given form. As alarms began to stir across the base, Issa keyed the mic. The frequency crackled. "Echo 9, she said quietly. "This is Falcon 4. A pause, then disbelief. "Falcon 4, command said. "I'm already up there." The Iron Angel rolled into the rain and lifted into darkness, climbing not for permission, but for people. How low can you fly before fear lets go? The storm over the Hindu Kush was alive. Lightning stitched the sky as Issa dropped beneath the cloud ceiling, flying low enough to feel the mountains breathe. Rain hammered the canopy. Her world shrank to instruments and instinct. Echo 9's coordinates flashed. Muzzle fire flickered like dying stars below. "Found you," she breathed. The gun spun up, a sound she felt in her bones. The first pass tore open the ridgeline, controlled, precise. Not rage, protection. On the ground, Marines froze, then moved. A woman's voice cut through the chaos, calm as steel. "You've got 1 minute. Move north." RPG trails burned past her wingtips. An explosion rocked the aircraft. Warning screamed. She silenced what she could, ignored the rest. She dove again. Missiles screamed free, erasing a threat that had pinned them moments before. The valley burned, then opened. Damage mounted, hydraulics failing, engine coughing, she kept flying. "They're painting you," a Marine warned. "I know." She dumped flares, rolled, felt the shock wave punch the airframe sideways. Pain flared in her shoulder, sharp and distant. Below, 5 figures ran through the path she carved. She covered them until they vanished into shadow. "Echo 9 secure," came the call. Only then did she look at her own instruments, red everywhere. She turned away from the valley, smoke trailing like a confession, and aimed for whatever sky was left. What do you hold onto when the aircraft whoa? Silence followed the second engine's death, the kind that makes gravity feel personal. Issa guided the wounded jet along a river gorge using terrain like memory. Her breath came measured, deliberate. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. The ground rushed up faster than the math said it should. She cut power, flared, braced. The impact was violent but survivable. Metal screamed, then rain hissing, quiet. Issa woke pinned, bleeding, alive. She cut herself free, crawled from the wreckage, and leaned against the scorched fuselage that had saved her one last time. She activated the beacon. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Mission complete. Pilot down, alive. She rested her hand on the Iron Angel's skin as rotors thumped somewhere far away. Or maybe it was just her heart. Still flying, she thought, and let the darkness come gently. When the noise fades, what remains? Dawn broke bruised and pale. Echo 9 heard the signal before command could bury it. They flew anyway. They found her smiling up at the sky, bloodied, unbroken. Later came medals and questions and careful words. Issa answered simply. It was about coming home. She chose not to return to the cockpit. Instead, she taught. Young pilots listened as she spoke about fear, about restraint, about the quiet moments when a decision defines you. Courage isn't noise, she told them. Sometimes it's a whisper. On quiet evenings, she walked the flight line. A rebuilt A-10 waited, nose art reborn. She touched the metal, feeling warmth instead of ghosts. The sky hadn't forgotten her, neither had the people. Because sometimes, dignity doesn't argue. It doesn't shout. It simply acts. Why did the calmest voice in the room always sound like the one that had already given up? The operations room at Bagram Air Base smelled faintly of burnt coffee and recycled air. Screens glowed in neat rows, painting everyone's faces the same pale blue, like emotion had been filtered out along with the noise. To anyone watching from outside, it looked orderly, controlled, safe. But safety, Issa Morno had learned, often came from distance, not truth. Echo 9's second transmission landed heavier than the first. Not louder, shorter, pinned coordinates transmitting, immediate support requested. The duty officer paused mid-sentence, pen hovering over the log. For half a second, uncertainty flickered across his face. Then training took over. He glanced at the weather monitor, then the asset board. Red lines everywhere. Storm cells closing. Visibility degrading by the minute. No airframes available, he said, like reading the time. The words were clean, professional. They carried no weight of consequence, no smell of blood or cordite, just syllables. Captain Reed's voice came back over the radio, tighter now. No wasted breath. The kind of voice you used when you'd already decided fear was a luxury. This is Echo 9 Actual. We are taking sustained fire, multiple wounded. We need eyes in the sky. Silence followed, not technical, not accidental, chosen. Issa heard it all through a headset she wasn't authorized to wear anymore. She stood in the hangar, frozen mid-motion, grease staining her gloves, the A-10's exposed engine open in front of her like a ribcage. Every word snapped something awake in her chest. She knew that tone. She had used it once herself, years ago, when her wingman had gone down and command had taken too long to answer. The radio cracked again, a different voice now, younger, breathing hard. If anyone hears this, we're running out of cover. Issa closed her eyes. Across the base, Colonel Abrams entered the operations room with the quiet authority of someone who had learned how to make decisions quickly and live with them slowly. He listened for less than 30 seconds before nodding. Terrain and weather make air insertion non-viable, he said. We'll advise ground maneuver when conditions improve. Someone hesitated just a fraction. Sir, that valley. Abrams cut him off gently. We don't trade aircraft for hope. The decision was logged, time-stamped, approved. In the hangar, Issa pulled the headset from her ears like it had burned her. Her heart was beating too fast, like it was trying to outpace her thoughts. She wiped her hands on a rag that was already ruined and walked toward the communications office, each step measured, deliberate. The young communications officer barely looked up when she leaned into the doorway. Echo 9's requesting close air support, she said, keeping her voice level. You're not dispatching anyone. He sighed, already tired of a conversation he hadn't wanted. It's not my call. It never is, she replied. He finally met her eyes. There was something there, recognition, maybe guilt, but not enough to change anything. Ground command denied, weather's closing, you're not cleared, Captain. The word captain landed wrong, like a relic pulled from a drawer. I flew that corridor 3 years ago, Issa said quietly. If they're trapped on the eastern ridgeline, there's no lateral cover. They'll be boxed in before dawn. The officer swallowed. Sir says risk outweighs benefit. Issa nodded once. It always does until it doesn't. She turned away before he could respond. Outside, the wind had picked up. Cargo nets snapped against crates. Fuel drums rattled like nervous teeth. The sky was bruising over, clouds stacking like bad decisions. Issa walked until she reached the edge of the runway, where the lights blurred into the dark. Her hands were shaking now. She hated that part. Hated that after everything, fear still found her. Not fear of dying, but of repeating herself. Of becoming the person who followed rules so closely she forgot why they existed. The radio crackled again, faint but desperate. "We're hit, 2 down we need." The transmission cut off. Issa sank onto the cold metal steps outside the hangar. For a moment she pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to slow her breathing. Ignored. That was the word that settled into her bones. Not just now, but always. Ignored by command, by policy, by history. She reached into her pocket and felt the worn fabric there. The old patch, Falcon 4. She hadn't sewn it onto anything since the hearing. Couldn't bring herself to throw it away. A memory surfaced without warning. Another night, another storm, her wingman's voice breaking through static. "I'm losing her, Issa, I can't." She'd screamed into the radio then, screamed until her throat burned. Command had answered too late. Her jaw clenched. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn. Sergeant Harlow's voice was careful, like he was approaching an animal that might bolt. "You okay, Morno?" She nodded, even though she wasn't sure what that meant anymore. "They're not sending anyone," she said. Not accusing, just stating fact. Harlow was quiet for a long moment. "Yeah, I heard." The rain started then, soft at first, then harder. The kind that soaked through uniforms and decisions alike. "I keep thinking," Issa said, her voice barely audible over the wind, "about what they'll write in the report. Hostile contact, extraction delayed, losses sustained." Harlow exhaled slowly. "Paper doesn't feel it." "No," she agreed, "but people do." The radio flared again, louder this time, like it was fighting to stay alive. "This is Echo 9 Actual," Captain Reed said, strain finally breaking through. "If anyone hears this, we are out of options." Issa stood. The movement felt automatic, like muscle memory taking over before doubt could catch up. She stared across the tarmac toward Hangar 14. Her hangar. The one she wasn't supposed to enter alone anymore. Harlow followed her gaze. "Don't," he said softly. "I haven't done anything," she replied. "Yet." They stood there as the rain soaked them both, the storm crawling closer, the radio hissing between words. Issa felt the weight of every consequence press against her chest, court-martial, prison, being erased completely. And beneath it all, something quieter. 5 voices, waiting. She picked up the headset again, tuning to the open frequency, fingers hovering over the mic. For a second, she imagined staying silent, letting the night pass, letting the system do what it always did. Her thumb pressed the button. "This is someone listening," she said, careful with her words. "Echo 9, say again." The response came instantly, too fast, like they'd been holding their breath. "We're here," Reed said. Are you air?" Issa closed her eyes. "Not yet," she answered, "but you're not alone." She released the mic and felt something settle inside her. Not peace, not certainty. Resolve. The storm rolled closer, thunder echoing across the base like distant engines warming up. And for the first time in 2 years, Issa Morno stopped feeling grounded. What do you do when the rules are clear, but the silence is louder than any order? The base clock crept past midnight without ceremony. No alarms, no speeches, just the slow, indifferent movement of time while lives hung in the dark. Rain slashed sideways across Bram Air Base, turning the runway into a mirror of broken light. Most of the base had gone quiet, the kind of quiet that pretends nothing is wrong. Issa Morno couldn't sit still. She paced the length of the tarmac, boots splashing through shallow puddles, each step stirring reflections of floodlights that shattered and reformed beneath her feet. The mechanic's jacket clung heavy on her shoulders, soaked through, oil and rain mixing into something that smelled like work unfinished. Every few seconds, thunder rolled across the mountains, low and distant, like engines clearing their throats. Echo Nine's voices echoed in her head. Not the words, she'd stopped hearing those, but the spaces between them. The pauses where fear tried to break through discipline. The silence after unanswered calls. She stopped walking and looked toward Hangar 14. Her hangar. The A-10 sat inside, lights off, patient and dark. A red tag dangled from the nose gear, fluttering slightly in the draft. Inoperable. Do not fly. Paper. She knew every inch of that aircraft better than she knew most people. She'd bled on its skin once, laughed inside its cockpit, trusted it with her life more times than she could count. Over the past 2 years, she'd rebuilt it piece by piece under the excuse of maintenance. New hydraulic seals, repaired feed lines, systems tested quietly, logged unofficially. The jet wasn't broken. She was just not allowed to be whole. Issa's chest tightened. Anxiety crept in, cold and familiar. Not fear of death, she'd made peace with that long ago, but fear of crossing a line she couldn't uncross. Once you step outside the system, it doesn't forgive. It replaces you. You're grounded for a reason, she whispered to herself. Another voice answered back, quieter but steadier. They'll die without you. She reached Hangar 14 and stopped beneath its overhang, rain dripping from her hair onto the concrete. Her reflection stared back at her in the dark glass of the office window. She barely recognized herself. Not the sharp-eyed pilot from years ago. Someone older, heavier, more tired. But still here. Her hand hovered near the access keypad. Dual authorization required. Pilot code and command override. The first lived in her fingers. The second lived in her memory like a forbidden prayer. She thought of the hearing room, the clean table, the men who'd never been in that valley telling her what the right call should have been. You don't disobey orders, Colonel Hayes had said. You execute them. I refuse to kill civilians, she'd answered. And now 5 of our people are dead because you broke formation. That wasn't true, she knew it. But truth had been heavier than rank that day, and rank had won. Lightning cracked overhead, so close she felt it in her teeth. Issa exhaled slowly and typed the first code. The keypad beeped. Her pulse jumped. She hesitated, hand hovering before the second sequence. This was the point of no return. After this, there would be no explanation clean enough, no apology sufficient. The radio crackled faintly from her pocket, the emergency frequency still open. Ammo low holding but. The transmission cut off in a wash of static. Her fingers moved. Green light. The hangar doors slid open with a low, mechanical groan, revealing the Iron Angel in shadow. Rain swept inside, mist curling around the aircraft's bulk like breath. Issa stepped in and felt the world narrow. The smell of metal and oil wrapped around her, familiar, grounding. She crossed to the ladder and paused, one hand on the cold metal rung. Her reflection stared back at her from the canopy, older eyes but the same resolve. Okay, she whispered, one last time. She climbed. The cockpit swallowed her, the seat fitting like memory. For a heartbeat, she just sat there, hands resting on her thighs, listening to the storm beat against the fuselage. This was where she had always made sense of things. Here, choices were immediate, honest. She flipped the battery master switch. The aircraft answered. Displays flickered alive. Soft hums filled the cockpit as systems woke, one by one like a body stretching after sleep. Issa moved through the checklist automatically, voice low, almost reverent. Hydraulics, fuel, surfaces. All green, she murmured, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Behind her, footsteps echoed sharply. Morno. She stiffened but didn't turn. Sergeant Harlow stood at the hangar entrance, rain dripping from his sleeves, eyes wide as they adjusted to the interior light. What the hell are you doing? She kept her hands moving, saving time. You start those engines, tower will light up like a Christmas tree, he said, panic creeping in. They'll stop you. I'll be gone before they decide how. They'll court-martial you, he said again, like the words might change shape if he repeated them. Issa finally looked back at him. They can have my bars, she said quietly. I won't give them 5 lives. Harlow swallowed hard. His gaze shifted to the aircraft, then back to her. Echo 9, he said. She nodded. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the storm and the soft whine of systems warming. Finally, Harlow turned and walked to the hangar control panel. What are you? Issa started. The massive doors began to open, groaning against the rain and wind. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of the mountains. Harlow didn't look at her. Winds are clearing east. Radar shadow for about 20 minutes if you hug the terrain. Her throat tightened. You don't have to. I know, he cut in. Then softer, just come back alive. The first turbine ignited with a deep, rolling growl. The sound filled the hangar, vibrating through Issa's chest, through her bones. The second followed, louder, angrier, like thunder given form. Warning lights blinked on around the base. Somewhere, alarms began to wake. Issa keyed her headset, tuning to the frequency Echo 9 was bleeding into. Static then. This is Echo 9. Anyone out there? Her thumb pressed the mic. This is Falcon 4, she said, voice calm, almost gentle. I see you. There was a pause on the other end, then a breath she felt through the radio. Say again. I'm already up here, she repeated. The Iron Angel rolled forward, rain hissing beneath its tires. Issa lined up on the runway, floodlights blurring into streaks of gold. Her heart hammered, not with fear but with clarity. She pushed the throttle. The aircraft surged, engines screaming, the storm swallowing sound and doubt alike. At the far end of the runway, she pulled back on the stick. The ground fell away. Behind her, the base erupted into motion, voices shouting, protocols scrambling, orders trying to catch up. Ahead of her, the mountains waited. And for the first time in 2 years, Issa Morno wasn't running from the sky. She was answering it. How close can you get to the ground before fear lets go and instinct takes over? The storm didn't part for her arrival. It closed around her instead, thick and unwelcoming, like the mountains had decided to test whether she belonged there anymore. Issa dropped the Iron Angel beneath the cloud ceiling, rain hammering the canopy so hard it sounded like thrown gravel. Lightning flared in violent seams across the sky, turning the world white for a split second, then black again. She flew low, lower than doctrine, lower than comfort. 30 feet above terrain that wanted her dead. Every vibration spoke to her through the stick, through the pedals, through the seat that pressed into her spine. The A-10 wasn't graceful, but it was honest. It told you when it was hurting. It told you when it was angry. Right now, it was neither. It was focused. Issa exhaled slowly, counting her breath the way she'd learned to years ago when panic tried to take over mid-mission. 4 in, hold, 4 out. The radio hissed, then steadied. This is Echo 9, came the voice, thin and strained beneath gunfire. Coordinates transmitting now. We're surrounded. I've got you, Issa said, eyes scanning the terrain ahead. Her night vision washed the world in green, the valley resolving into sharp contrast. Heat blooms, movement, tracer fire cutting upward like desperate signals. She recognized the shape of the ridgeline instantly, a narrow bowl with teeth, no lateral escape. Anyone stuck there would be pinned from 3 sides. Hold position, she said, helps inbound. A pause, then disbelief. Command said. Command not here, Issa replied. I am. She throttled back slightly, nose dipping as the valley opened beneath her. Her heart beat hard but steady, determined. This was the part no one talked about, the seconds before action, where doubt tried one last time to pull you away. She pushed past it. The GAU-8 cannon spun up with a low, rising growl that vibrated through the aircraft, through her ribs. She lined up the first pass with care, adjusting for wind shear, for elevation, for the fact that friendlies were closer than she liked. Falcon 4 hot, she whispered, then squeezed the trigger. The Iron Angel roared. 30mm rounds tore through the ridgeline, precise and unforgiving, ripping open firing positions that had pinned Echo 9 for nearly an hour. The valley exploded into light and sound, dirt and stone thrown skyward, as if the mountain itself was recoiling. On the ground, 5 figures froze, then moved. Jesus, someone shouted over the radio. Who the hell is that? Issa pulled up hard, banking left as return fire streaked past her wing tips. Bright lines of anger, missing her by feet. Close enough that she felt the shockwave of an RPG detonation slap the aircraft's side. Warning lights blinked. Minor damage, she said calmly, though her jaw was tight. Echo 9, you've got 1 minute. Move north, don't look back. Sergeant Bishop's voice came through, breathless, charged with adrenaline. Copy, moving. She rolled the aircraft, dropping back into the valley on a second pass, lower this time. Too low for comfort. Treetops blurred beneath her, branches snapping against the belly armor. The A-10 shuddered, not in fear but effort. An enemy vehicle lit up on thermal near the eastern ridge. She didn't hesitate. Maverick away. The missile screamed into the dark and struck with a bloom that rattled the clouds. The ridge collapsed inward, fire and dust swallowing the position entirely. Target neutralized, she said, voice even, almost distant. Inside, something twisted, not pride, responsibility. The radio crackled again. Falcon, they're adjusting fire, laser designation. I see them. She dumped flares and rolled hard, the horizon flipping as the aircraft groaned under the strain. G-forces pressed her down, vision narrowing at the edges. Her shoulder screamed where old injuries met new stress. Then the warning tone changed. Hydraulics. Her stomach tightened, not panic, calculation. Okay, she murmured, okay. A missile streaked out of the mist, too close, too fast. She banked instinctively, flares bursting behind her like falling stars. The shockwave hit a heartbeat later, slamming the aircraft sideways. The cockpit filled with smoke for half a second before the system cleared it. Red lights bloomed across the panel. Falcon 4 taking damage, she said, teeth clenched. Still flying. Below, Echo 9 moved through the chaos she'd carved, their heat signatures breaking apart, heading north just as she'd ordered. She watched until she was sure, until they were clear. Only then did she allow herself to feel the cost. The left engine coughed, oil pressure dropping fast. The aircraft vibrated unevenly now, wounded but stubborn. Issa adjusted trim manually, bypassing alarms that begged her to stop. Echo 9, she called. Status. North Ridge clear, Bishop replied. You bought us a path. Good. She climbed just enough to clear the valley, the aircraft protesting every foot gained. Rain streaked across the cracked canopy, distorting the world into silver lines. Lightning flashed again, close enough to light the cockpit like daylight. Her fuel readout flickered. Too low. Falcon 4 to base, she transmitted, though she didn't expect an answer. Echo 9 secure, aircraft damaged, I'm heading west. Only static replied. She swallowed, a flicker of anxiety slipping through her resolve. Not for herself, but for what came next. She knew these mountains. She knew how they punished mistakes. Another explosion rocked the tail, shrapnel tearing through the stabilizer. The aircraft lurched violently, nose dipping. "Come on," she hissed, wrestling the stick. "Not now." The Iron Angel fought back, leveling just above the treetops. Every warning light blinked now, a constellation of red defiance. Below her, the valley burned in scattered fires, the aftermath of minutes that would decide whether 5 men lived or died. She didn't look away. She never did. "You're not dying tonight," she whispered, unsure whether she was speaking to the Marines, the aircraft, or herself. The left engine died. The sudden silence was worse than the noise. The aircraft yawed hard, gravity reasserting itself with cruel clarity. Issa compensated instantly, feathering controls, her breath coming faster now, the edge of fear creeping back in. "Still flying?" "Barely." She turned toward the mountains, toward a river gorge she remembered from old maps and older nightmares. If she could ride it low enough, maybe she could glide clear of hostile radar. Maybe. Her oxygen mask rattled with each breath. Sweat stung her eyes. Her hands ached, knuckles white on the controls. The radio crackled weakly. "Falcon 4, Bishop's voice again, quieter now. Are you okay?" She hesitated, just a beat. "Holding," she said. "You keep moving. We can guide you." "Negative," her voice hardened. "You stay dark, I'm not leading them to you." She cut the channel. The gorge opened beneath her, a narrow ribbon of silver cutting through black stone. Wind tore at the aircraft, pushing and pulling like hands trying to drag her down. She rode it anyway, trusting memory more than instruments that were already dying. Her right engine sputtered. "No," she breathed. "No, no." The engine flamed out. Silence fell heavy and absolute. For a moment fear flooded her chest, cold and sharp. Broken, this was the word that surfaced. Broken aircraft, broken career, broken rules. Then something else followed. Hope. Not loud, not triumphant, just enough. "Okay," she said to the jet, voice steadying again. "It's just us now." She flew by feel, by muscle memory, by the deep, stubborn loyalty of an aircraft built to survive when it shouldn't. The storm split overhead, lightning tracing the mountains like scars. Behind her, miles away, 5 Marines moved through darkness because a voice had answered when the world stayed silent. Ahead of her, the ground rose fast. Issa leaned forward, eyes fixed on a horizon she could barely see anymore, and held the Iron Angel together with everything she had left. Not because she was fearless, but because she refused to let fear be the last thing that spoke. What do you do when the aircraft finally lets go, but you're not ready to? The silence after the second engine died felt unreal, like the world had been muted without warning. No roar, no vibration, just wind screaming past torn metal and the steady pull of gravity reclaiming what it was owed. Issa Morno tightened her grip on the controls, knuckles aching, breath shallow inside her mask. "Okay," she whispered again, softer this time. Not a command, a plea. "Stay with me." The Iron Angel answered in the only way it could, by not falling apart. Not yet. The altimeter needle dropped faster than she liked. The horizon tilted, then steadied as she coaxed the wounded aircraft into a shallow glide. Rain lashed the canopy, blurring the gorge ahead into streaks of silver and shadow. Trees rushed up toward her, too close, their tops clawing at the belly armor as if the mountain itself were reaching to pull her down. Her instruments blinked out one by one. First the radar, then navigation, then the comforting lie of numbers that told her where she was. What remained was feel. She flew by pressure in the stick, by the tone of wind against the fuselage, by instincts honed long before rules and hearings and silence had intervened. The aircraft groaned, metal protesting every correction, but it responded, loyal to the end. Her oxygen feed stuttered. Issa tore the mask loose and sucked in air that tasted like smoke and rain. Her chest burned, ribs screaming with every breath. She welcomed the pain. It kept her present. A memory rose unbidden. Her father's voice, years ago standing on a dusty airfield she barely remembered. If it stops making sense up there, he'd said, pointing to the sky, fly the airplane. Don't fight the moment. Be in it. Be in it, she muttered now, eyes fixed ahead. The gorge narrowed. A river flashed beneath her, swollen and wild, its surface catching lightning in broken reflections. There was no runway, no flat ground, just angles and chance. She made the decision without ceremony. Cut main power. Manual flaps. Nose down just enough. The Iron Angel dropped hard, then leveled, skimming the riverbank in a spray of water and mud. Issa braced as the ground rushed up, the impact slamming through her body like a collision with memory itself. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. The world lurched sideways. Then stillness. Not quiet, not peace. Just the heavy, stunned pause after violence when even the air seems unsure whether to move again. Rain hissed against cooling metal. Steam rose where fire had almost been. Issa didn't move at first. She counted breaths instead. 1, 2, 3, everything hurt but nothing felt gone. That mattered. Okay, she whispered, forcing her eyes open. The cockpit was a ruin of cracked displays and hanging wires. The canopy above her was split open, rain pouring through, washing soot and blood from her face. Blood. She touched her temple, fingers coming away red. A shallow cut, painful but manageable. Her right arm was pinned, numb with pressure. She tested her legs, agony flared, but they responded. Still here. She fumbled for the harness release with her left hand. It took 3 tries. When it finally gave, gravity pulled her sideways and she hit the mud hard, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. She lay there gasping, rain filling her mouth, the world spinning. Broken. The words surfaced again, louder now. No, she said out loud, dragging herself forward. Not done. She crawled out of the wreckage, every movement a negotiation with pain. The night outside was dim and blue, lit intermittently by lightning that painted the ravine in harsh, fleeting clarity. The Iron Angel lay crumpled behind her, wings bent like something that had tried to protect the earth and failed. Or succeeded. She reached the emergency kit half buried near the tail. Her hands shook as she opened it. Medgel cracked, useless, but the beacon, small, battered, still blinked. 1 pulse every 3 seconds. Hope reduced to a rhythm. She turned it on and leaned back against the warm metal of the fuselage, rain soaking her hair, her jacket, her skin. Her breath came in ragged bursts now. The adrenaline was bleeding away, leaving exhaustion in its place. Issa pulled the handheld radio close and switched to emergency frequency. Her voice was weak, but steady. 3 short. 3 long. 3 short. SOS. She paused, swallowing against the tightness in her throat, then added, slower this time, deliberate. Mission complete. Pilot down, alive. The radio clicked softly, no reply. She let her head rest back against the aircraft and closed her eyes for a moment. Just a moment. The rain fell on her face like applause she hadn't earned and hadn't asked for. In the distance, she thought she heard it, rotors low and rhythmic. Or maybe it was only her heart refusing to slow. Either way, she smiled faintly. You're safe, she whispered, not sure who she meant. Echo 9, the aircraft, herself. The storm began to drift east as the night wore on, thunder rolling farther away with each passing minute. Issa stayed awake by focusing on small things, the feel of mud beneath her boots, the warmth of the fuselage at her back, the steady blink of the beacon. Ignored, broken, forgotten. The words no longer fit. Somewhere beyond the mountains, 5 Marines were moving toward extraction because a voice had answered them when no one else would. They would talk about this night in fragments, in disbelief, in gratitude that never quite found the right shape. They would say a pilot saved them. They would never fully understand what it cost her to choose that moment. As dawn began to thin the darkness, the sound returned clearer now. Rotors, real this time. Issa opened her eyes, rainwater streaking her lashes, and looked up through the broken canopy at a sky she had nearly died inside. "Still flying," she murmured, resting her hand on the Iron Angel's scorched skin. "We did good." The searchlight cut through the mist, sweeping the ravine until it found her. When it did, it lingered, steady and certain like a promise kept. And for the first time since the engines had gone quiet, Issa Morno let herself believe that coming home wasn't a violation of the rules. It was the reason they existed. What remains after the noise fades, and the world finally catches up. Dawn arrived gently, as if the mountains were trying to apologize. The storm had moved on during the night, dragging its violence east and leaving the ravine washed clean and aching quiet. Mist curled up from the river like breath from a sleeping body. The wreck of the Iron Angel lay half-cradled by earth and stone, scarred, bent, but strangely dignified. No fireball, no spectacle, just metal cooling after doing what it had been asked to do. Issa Morno felt the sound before she fully heard it. Rotors. Low at first, uncertain, then steady. She opened her eyes, every muscle protesting, and tilted her head toward the noise. The searchlight broke through the mist moments later, sweeping across the ravine walls, across shattered trees, across twisted aluminum, until it stopped on her. The light didn't rush, it didn't flinch. It stayed. Issa lifted one hand slowly, not in triumph, not even in greeting, just enough to say, "I'm here." The Blackhawk descended with careful patience, rotor wash flattening the mist and whipping rainwater from leaves like silver dust. The rope dropped. Boots hit the ground. Sergeant Bishop was the first to reach her. He looked smaller than she remembered from the radio, lean, exhausted, bandaged along his shoulder and ribs. His eyes were red with fatigue and something else that hadn't yet decided whether it wanted to be relief or anger. "You're real," he said, almost accusingly. Issa smiled, the movement pulling at split skin. "Last I checked." He knelt in the mud beside her, shaking his head. "You're not supposed to be." "Neither were you," she said quietly. Behind him, the rest of Echo 9 formed a loose perimeter out of habit more than necessity. Weapons scanned the tree line, but the valley was done with them now. It had taken its toll and moved on. As they secured her into the harness, Bishop leaned close, his voice rough. "Command," losing their mind. She breathed out slowly, "They'll live." The ascent was slow and careful. As the cable pulled her upward, the wreckage shrank beneath her, the Iron Angel becoming less a machine and more a memory. Issa watched it disappear beneath the canopy and felt something loosen inside her chest. Inside the helicopter, medics worked quietly, efficiently. Someone wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Someone else pressed a headset into her hand so she could hear over the roar. Bishop sat across from her, elbows on his knees, staring like he was afraid she might vanish again if he looked away. "You saved us," he said finally. Issa met his eyes, tired, proud, broken in places that wouldn't show on an X-ray. "I answered," she corrected gently, "that's all." At base, the reaction came in waves. First confusion, then urgency, then something close to disbelief. Doctors crowded her bed. Questions came rapid and clinical. How long without oxygen? How many impacts? Where does it hurt? She answered what she could, slept through the rest. When she woke again, the room was quieter. Sunlight filtered through blinds, stripping the walls with gold. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The beeping monitor grounded her. The ache confirmed everything else. She turned her head and saw Colonel Abrams standing near the window. He looked older in daylight, less carved from stone, more tired. They regarded each other in silence, two people who had made opposing choices and lived to see the outcome. "You weren't cleared for flight," he said eventually. "No, sir." "You disobeyed a direct command." Yes. Another pause, longer this time. You saved 5 lives. Issa swallowed. They would have done the same. Abrams nodded slowly. Perhaps. He hesitated, then added, the report won't be clean. I don't need it to be. He studied her face, the bruising, the stubborn calm. You cost us an aircraft. She glanced toward the window, toward mountains she could no longer see. It brought everyone home, she said, including me. Abrams exhaled through his nose, a sound that might have been a sigh. Rest, he said at last. We'll talk later. When he left, the room felt lighter. Echo 9 visited that afternoon, moving carefully through IV lines and monitors. They brought no speeches, no dramatics, just presence. Bishop set something on her bedside table. A small, scorched piece of metal, edges warped, lettering barely visible. If I fail, I die alone. It was part of your tail section, he said. Thought you should have it. Issa touched it with her fingertips. I didn't fail. No, he agreed, and you weren't alone. Recovery took weeks. The bruises faded. The stitches came out. Some pain lingered, settling into places that would ache when the weather changed. Command made their offers, retirement with honor, a return under restrictions. Issa listened politely. Then she made a third choice. 2 months later, sunlight poured into a hangar at Nellis Air Force Base, where a group of young pilots stood waiting, helmets tucked under their arms, eyes bright with ambition and uncertainty. Issa walked to the front slowly, still favoring one side. She wore a flight suit again, not as a promise but as a reminder. They had heard the story, of course they had, the ghost pilot, the forbidden sortie, the woman who flew into a storm no one else would touch. She let them believe the legend for exactly one breath. Courage, she said, voice steady, isn't noise. They leaned in. It's not the loudest voice in the room. It's not the cleanest decision on paper. Courage is the quiet moment when you realize someone is waiting for you and you decide not to look away. She paused, letting that settle. You'll be trained to follow procedure, she continued. And you should. It saves lives. But never forget why those procedures exist. When the answer is silence and the silence is costing lives, listen closely. There's usually a whisper telling you what matters. Afterward, she walked the flight line alone as evening stretched long and warm across the tarmac. A rebuilt A-10 sat waiting, its paint fresh, its systems new. On its nose, a familiar grin. Iron Angel II. A young officer called out from behind her. Ready to fly again, Captain. Issa smiled, not wide, not dramatic, just real. Always, she said. Above her, the sky stretched open and endless, no longer a graveyard of ghosts, but a place of possibility again. And somewhere, 5 men slept easier because a woman had refused to let dignity die quietly. Because sometimes, the bravest thing isn't to be seen. Sometimes, dignity doesn't speak at all. It simply acts.